I'm fascinated with angels, and therefore I wrote a book on them. One of the best ways of learning about something is to write a book about it. Just as you learn more on the teacher's side of the desk than you ever did on the student's side. But I don't know how to teach my own books, because if it's worth saying, I should have put it in the book, and if it's not worth saying, I shouldn't say it. So the only thing I can do is assume that there's a lot of stuff that I should have said that's not in the book, and to say it. This book has 100 questions about angels. I'll just pick about 10 or 20 and say something about them. And the first question is, how come there's so many books about angels now? For the last, 20 or 30 years, there's been more books about angels than in the previous 100. Why is that? Well, there's psychological explanations, there's sociological explanations, but I think the most obvious explanation is more angels are showing themselves now than they did before. Now, I'm not a historian or any kind of expert on history, but the little I know about history tells me that there are times of crisis when one age is ending and another is beginning, like the fall of Rome and the rise of the church, or like the Renaissance and the Reformation, when one era, let's say the ancient, passes and another, the medieval, begins, or when that new era becomes old and another begins, which happened in about 500 years ago. And I think we're living through that kind of a time today. And that's why during those times there are more miracles, more martyrs, and more angels. Those three things seem to go together. And in the last century, there have been more martyrs than in the previous 19 all put together. There have been more Marian appearances, more miracles, and more angel sightings. Now, I think many of the so-called angel sightings are fakes, and many of the books on angels are fakes, but not all of them. And if you're interested in actual stories about people who meet angels, I would recommend the books by Joan Webster Anderson, who's a good, sound Catholic lady and has done research on all these stories, and she's very responsible. Don't read the National Enquirer or anything coming out of the Washington, D.C. So the fact that angels seem to be appearing today is, on the one hand, a cause for rejoicing. Wonderful, God is sending his messengers. But on the other hand, it's a cause for worry, because he sends angels only where they're needed, where the battle is heating up. And the battle seems to be heating up today. I think the world is getting more and more decadent and more desperately wicked. And in response, the church is getting stronger and holier. God is preparing an antidote for the poisons that he sees in the world. And we are his antidotes. And so are the angels. We're also naturally fascinated with angels at any time because they're different. We're fascinated with angels the same way we're fascinated with superheroes like Superman, or aliens like E.T., extraterrestrials. Well, the angels are the real extraterrestrials. They're not fictional. They're real. When I teach about angels, and once in a while I teach a whole course on angels and demons, one of the questions I ask my students in a questionnaire, just to find out where they're coming from, is how interested are you in angels? And all of them say they're quite interested, that's why they're in the course. But another question I ask is, how interested are you in animals? And I find there's a definite correlation between their answers to those two questions. And it's not what you would expect. You might expect that those who are more spiritually minded are interested in angels but not animals. and those who are more materially or biologically or bodily minded are interested in animals but not angels. No, just the opposite. There's a definite tendency to be more interested in both of those things together or neither of them. And I think that's because some people have very curious, open minds, and they're interested in things that are surprisingly different, especially intelligence in non-human forms. And there is animal intelligence. In fact, animals are much more intelligent than most people think, and they aren't human, but sometimes they get pretty close. And angels are also intelligent, but they're not human. Angels are not human souls without human bodies. None of us will ever become an angel. Angels are a different species, as different from us as the animals are. And some people are fascinated in things that are different and surprising, and some people aren't. Some people like things that are familiar and comfortable and don't like their minds to be expanded and surprised. So if you're interested in angels, congratulations. But unfortunately, nobody is an expert on angels. There are people who are experts on animals. We understand them pretty well. In fact, we understand them much better than they understand us. Well, I suspect that that's about the same as with the angels. They understand us much better than we understand them. In fact, I suspect that we understand angels about as well as our dogs and cats understand us. And maybe they have the same sort of attitude towards us as we have towards our dogs or cats. They love us and they care for us, but we're pets. We're vastly inferior to angels. They're incredibly superior to us in knowledge, in will, in power. They're much closer to God by nature. And once you realize that, it becomes astonishing that God chose to unite himself with us. He never became an angel, but he became a human being. And that he chose to share his very divine life, his divine nature with us in Christ. The hypostatic union between the human nature of Christ and the divine nature of Christ not only never goes away, because the ascension was not the undoing of the incarnation. Christ kept his human body and soul forever, but he shares it with us. We are members of his body, not just recipients of his grace, not just recipients of his wisdom. Other religious figures and founders and sages and saints and philosophers tried to save us with their mind. They said, "This is my mind." Solomon, Socrates, Buddha. Jesus saved us by saying, "This is my body." So he came all the way down into these rational animals with his very nature. He didn't do that with angels. One of the tests, probably the major test, that angels were given that determined whether they were good angels or fallen angels was a test of pride. The standard explanation for how the devil fell is pride, because a pure spirit can't be tempted with lust or greed or most of the temptations that we're tempted with, but he certainly can be tempted with pride. If you're number two, you might resent not being number one. As Rodney Dangerfield says, if you're looking out for number one, you're going to probably step in some number two. Another version of the temptation that was given to the angels, the test that was given to the angels, which is in some of the Eastern Church Fathers, and it's also in the Quran, was that at the moment of their creation, God revealed to the angels that he was going to create human beings, and that the angels would be the servants of human beings, and that they had to guard us, who are vastly inferior to him. And in the Christian version, it was added that God revealed to the angels that he had planned to become incarnate as one of these human beings. And some of the angels said, "No, that's terrible. That's ridiculous." They were proud. They rebelled because they lacked humility. Humility is the opposite of pride, and that's a spiritual choice. Most sins are mixed. Most sins that human beings are subject to temptation to are physical as well as spiritual, but pride is purely spiritual, and so is humility. Although it's expressed materially, it's an attitude, a fundamental attitude of letting God be God and accepting your status as number two or less. And therefore, St. Augustine, when speaking of the virtues, said, the four cardinal virtues, which everybody knows from Plato and the Old Testament on, they go way back, namely wisdom and courage and self-control and justice. These are terribly important, said Augustine, but to my mind, the four cardinal virtues, the ones you start with, are humility, 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 and humility. Because humility doesn't mean having a low opinion of yourself, it means having an accurate opinion of yourself. I'm not God, I'm number two. And some of the angels said no to that. And we keep saying no to that. In fact, in every sin, we violate the first commandment, worship God alone. We're worshiping ourselves. We want to correct God. No, God, I want to do it my way. I think the song that everybody sings in hell as they enter hell is Sinatra's song, I did it my way. Whereas the song everybody sings as they enter heaven is God's way is the best way. Well, we know, I think, about as little about the angels as our pets know about us. That's still precious, but it's not much. So there are no angel experts. So in my book, there's very little that's original. Most of it I get from the Bible, the Church Fathers, and St. Thomas Aquinas, who was called the angelic doctor, not only because he so resembled an angel, but because he was an expert on angels. People who are skeptical about angels usually say, angelology is not a science. Science has nothing to do with angels. I'll take science instead of theology any day. It can prove itself. So angels seem to many people to be unscientific. And it's true. Angels are unscientific, and so is love, and so is beauty, and so is holiness. Science is a wonderful thing, but science is like laser light. It concentrates the light in a very small area so that it can penetrate through mysteries, as lasers penetrate through even steel. And that's very precious, but something is sacrificed. You start with ordinary consciousness, which is like a floodlight, which shows you the big picture. And then you narrow that to a spotlight, and then you narrow that further to laser light, and that's the scientific method. Well, that's fine, but there's a lot of stuff outside that narrow little beam. In fact, all the stuff that's the most important is outside that narrow little beam. So, of course, angels are unscientific, and so is almost anything else that's important. Scientific method can prove very strongly and conclusively a few unimportant things. But all the many important things, no, it can't. In fact, science can't even prove the validity of science. There's no proof by the scientific method alone that all proof comes by the scientific method alone. So when you hear somebody claim science has disproved the supernatural or angels, please get scientific for a minute and ask that person, okay, which science did that? What was the experiment that proved that? Who did it? And where? And they'll never be able to answer that question. In general, the whole story of science replacing religion, the so-called war between science and religion, it's a fake, it's a lie. There is no such war. There's not a single casualty. No science in history has ever disproved any single theological dogma, ever. Okay? How important are angels? Can you be a Christian without believing in angels? Can you be a Catholic without believing in angels? Well, angels are not the center of our faith, but the Bible clearly teaches that there are angels. They're on almost every page of the Bible, especially the important ones. Christ very clearly taught that there are angels and demons. So if there are no angels and no demons, then the Bible lies and Christ lies, and we don't have any divine authority anymore. So even though angels are not at the center of our faith, they're part of an essential package deal. And if they're not true, if they're only myths, then the church has been teaching error about them, and she's not what she claims to be. And also the Bible. And in that case, she may be in error about any other issue. Many people don't realize that divine revelation is a package deal. It's not a cafeteria where you can pick one dish without the other. Here is the cargo that we are entrusted with to teach the world about. And our master said it's all of a piece. And if you start throwing little pieces of the cargo overboard because you don't like it, that assumes that you have the authority to choose what is to be thrown overboard and what is to be delivered intact. For instance, almost everybody instinctively likes the idea that God is love. It's true, it's precious, it's profound, but it's also comforting. Everybody likes it. Almost nobody who is sane likes the divine revelation that says there is an eternal hell, and you can lose your only hope and joy forever and ever. If you like the doctrine of hell, there's something wrong with you. You have to be reluctant to accept it, but you have to accept it as part of the same package deal. It stands on exactly the same basis as the most popular doctrines, like God is love. How do you know that God is love? Does history prove it? Does your conscience prove it? Conscience is hard as nails. Does pure logic prove it? Of course not. What proves it? Christ proves it. But suppose he's wrong. Well, he's not wrong about that, but he's wrong about hell. Oh, well, if he's wrong about one thing, he can be wrong about anything. It's a package deal, and angels are part of the package deal. But we can't imagine an angel. When we do, we usually imagine them with wings and halos and so on, but they're pure spirits. They don't have wings. Wings are physical. They don't have physical halos. Those are simply symbols. All our pictures about angels are mythic and symbolic. They may be true symbols, but they're only symbolic. The halo symbolizes light and intelligence, and angels are supremely intelligent. But if you had a camera, you couldn't take a picture of an angel. They're not physical light, and they can move instantly from one place to another. In fact, angels are very much like subatomic particles according to quantum physics. When you move an electron from one orbit to another within an atom, you discover, to your amazement, that it takes no time at all to pass through that space. And at no time do you find the electron anywhere else except on the first orbit or on the second orbit. You never find it anywhere in between. So the rules of time and space are transcended when you get to subatomic particles. I don't fully understand that either. I'm not a physicist. But it's true. Well, that's how angels work. They can move instantly from one place to another without ever appearing in between in time or space. Now, we can't imagine that. And we can't imagine a pure spirit. We can only imagine things that we've sensed or could sense. Things made of matter that are spread out in space. You can imagine a woman, you can imagine a man. You cannot imagine human nature, which makes a man and a woman equally human. You can abstract human nature from men and women, but when you imagine a human being, it has to be either male or female. So you can't imagine angels. And you can't see them. Well, then how come so many people have seen them? Well, for one of two reasons. Angels can influence your mind, and they can appear in a vision or a dream. But if you had a camera set up, the camera wouldn't reveal anything there. They're still pure spirits. They're not influencing your body, only your mind. A second way angels can appear is they can assume bodies. In the Bible, this is how they usually appear. The three angels that appeared to Abraham ate his food. In fact, in, I think, the Talmud, it says that great compendium of Jewish practical and theoretical lore, it says if you're visited by an angel and you wonder whether it was only a vision or whether the angel, by God's permission, assumed an apparently human body, you can tell which it is by offering the angel food. Now, angels always respect hospitality, and therefore they will eat some of your food. After the angel leaves, see if any food is missing. If not, it was only a vision. If so, it had a body. I love Jews, they're so practical. Jesus appealed to that principle after the resurrection in the upper room when the disciples said, "It's a spirit, it's a ghost." And Jesus said, "I'll prove I'm not a ghost. You got any food here?" They gave him some food. He ate it, it disappeared. It was real. So angels can perform physical deeds and even physical miracles, especially because God sometimes allows them to assume physical bodies. And they're usually disguises. A verse in Hebrews says, "Be sure to exercise hospitality to strangers, because many have entertained angels unaware." That homeless bum who's asking for a handout at your back door, that might be an angel. Wow. So, even though you can't imagine them in their own being as pure spirits, they usually come down to our level and assume bodies, and they're better at disguises than we are. I mean, our kids sometimes disguise themselves as angels or demons on Halloween. Nobody is fooled by that, but we are fooled by angels. Angels are like animals, different than us because they're only one thing. Angels are mere spirits. They don't have bodies at all by nature. And animals do not have immortal souls. They have animal life and animal intelligence, but it's not spiritual. So we, the human race, are the only thing in all reality that is both spiritual and physical. So we're the smartest animal and the stupidest angel. We're weird. Pascal, that great early modern Christian apologist, says that we are like blades of grass that can think. We grow up in the morning and then we die in the evening, and we're no more than a little blade of grass, but we can think. Amazing. And we're so weak and so tiny physically that it takes only a little germ to kill us. But when the universe kills us, as it always does, we can still think, and we're nobler than our slayer, which is ultimately the whole universe. So when you're killed by the universe, you can still smile and say, "I'm superior to you because I can think about you and you can't think about me." That reminds me of one of the things C.S. Lewis said. In 1941, after he had published the Screwtape Letters and became famous, Time magazine ran an article on him, and he was on the front page. And one of the questions the interviewer asked was, "You're a Christian, and you believe in God and heaven and the immortal soul. Well, you're engaged in a great war right now with Nazi Germany, and Germany seems to be winning. And there is a rumor that Hitler has a new weapon. He's working on this with his scientists. It's called an atom bomb. And if he gets that weapon, one single atom bomb can destroy an entire civilization. Now, what if that happens And what if you, as an Englishman, see that atom bomb falling from a German plane on London, and you realize that millions of people will die, and Germany will win the world, and all your best friends will be dead, and you too will be dead in, let's say, 5 seconds. And you have 5 seconds to think one single thought. What would the last thought of your life be? And Lewis said, I'd look at that bomb, I'd stick my tongue out at it, and I would say, pooh, you're only a bomb, I'm an immortal soul. That's good. He's right. The skeptic will say, wait a minute. If there are souls, they're dependent on bodies, and when the body dies, the soul dies too. Because, look, you can't think without a brain. So thinking is what the brain does, and once the brain dies, thinking ends. That's it. How can you believe in an immortal soul? A lot of materialists argue that way, and we do know enough about brain chemistry to know how dependent our thinking is on the brain. And it is true that if I give you a blow to the head, that alters your thinking or even stops it altogether. And it's even true that I can electrically stimulate different parts of the brain and cause you to see things that aren't there. That doesn't mean you can't think without a brain. In fact, you can. And there's even scientific proof that you can. Millions of people have thought without a brain in out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, which are very common. Somewhere between 10 and 20 million Americans have had experiences of thinking without a brain, while their brains were in brain death, and they came back. And when they came back, they related things. They were out of their bodies, and they saw things happening, and sometimes those things can be empirically verified. There is, in fact, a whole building in the University of Connecticut, in Storrs, Connecticut, devoted to a scientific study of out-of-body experiences. Now, the brain is the usual instrument of thought, but you can think without one. Because once you die, your brain is still there, but it's not working anymore. Why? Well, the brain's like a computer. And when the person at the computer dies, the computer doesn't do anything anymore. And the person who is at the computer, which is the brain and really the whole brain and body and nervous system, when it's gone, it's gone. Brain's still there. Brain user's not. We usually think of angels in our very inadequate way as something less than human, because they don't have bodies. And that's true. They can't smell the wonderful smell of steak on the barbecue grill, and they can't see, unless they assume bodies with human eyes, the beauty of colors that God has put into our world. And it could be that the fallen angels were jealous or envious of us as having bodies. That might have been part of their temptation, who knows. But we usually think of angels as less than us. We usually think of angels as human minds without human bodies. Now, when you die and you lose your body, that's a genuine loss. The soul is still there, but the soul doesn't have a body anymore. Therefore, it can't have any more sense experiences. You can't smell steak on the Barbie after you die until you get a resurrection body. So that's a loss. And that loss of the whole physical dimension is a terrible loss. That's why death is a tragedy. And you're not completely human until you get your resurrection body, your new body. We're destined for bodies. So we think that angels are like human souls without human bodies. Wrong. Because you lose something of your unique personality when you lose your body. But angels already have unique personalities. In fact, angels have more distinctive and more individual and more unique personalities than we have. So much so that Now, here's a very difficult idea, but it comes from St. Thomas Aquinas. So much so that each individual angel is a separate species. In other words, St. Michael the Archangel and St. Gabriel the Archangel are not different like laddie and lassie. They're different like dog and cat. Because the more spiritual you are, the more of a personality you have. Dogs are more like us than worms, and therefore they have more distinctive personality. And we're more like angels than dogs are. That's why we have distinctive personalities. Because there's far more possibilities for spiritual differences in personalities than for material differences. Think of all the ways that your body can suffer pain or experience pleasure. Not too many. Now think of all the ways in which your spirit can feel spiritual pain or spiritual pleasure. Far greater. Even more intense. Because if you're in great spiritual pain and despair, two of the things you very often spontaneously do are bang your head against the wall and pull your hair out. Those are two very painful experiences. Why are you giving yourself more pain when you're in that extreme spiritual pain of despair? Because the physical pain distracts you from the far worse spiritual pain. Which is why some of the saints and mystics say that they don't believe that there's material fire in hell, because that wouldn't make it so bad. It would distract you from the spiritual agony that's far greater. So angels have real personalities. That's why they're good guardians for us. If they were all the same, they couldn't deal with the difference between Peter and James and John, but they can. They understand those differences. Okay, so each of us has an angel. Jesus says so. We're assigned guardian angels. Every child, says Jesus, when they ask when the disciples say, "Don't bother Jesus with children," and Jesus says, "Let the children come unto me," because their angels, even now, are contemplating the face of the Father in heaven. So each of them has a guardian angel who's in heaven and earth at the same time. Angels can bilocate, like Padre Pio. So each of us has one, and they're unique. And each one is assigned to you at conception, and he never leaves you, never sleeps, guards you, guides you, helps you, fights spiritual warfare with you, invisibly, because demons are also invisible. And although this is not defined dogma, it's very reasonable. It is defined dogma that each of us has his own individual guardian angel. It's not defined dogma, but it's common opinion that each of us also has assigned by Satan a tempting demon. And that angel and that demon are fighting at every moment of your life. So the picture of an angel whispering in one ear and a demon whispering in the other ear is pretty accurate. Fortunately, there's a third person involved there. The angel votes for you and the demon votes against you, and you cast the deciding vote because you decide who to listen to. The beginning of holiness, the beginning of the life of being a saint starts with the mind. Who do you listen to? Here, in 2 weeks, April 15th, you're going to fill out your tax form. And almost anybody with any mind at all can figure out ways to lie and cheat on the tax form and rob the government of some of their taxes. And that's what one of the demons wants you to do. And the angel says, "You know, thou shalt not steal." And what do? Well, maybe you succumb and maybe you don't. What decides whether you're going to sin or not? Your mind. Who do you listen to? If you listen to that angel, you'll gradually see the beauty of holiness. And if you listen instead to the demon and say, "Shut up" to the angel, you'll be influenced by all the stuff you can buy and all the temporary pleasures you can get out of it. St. Paul says in one of his epistles, be sure to bring every thought into captivity to Christ. It starts with thought. That's why St. Benedict, commenting on Psalm 137, that beautiful psalm, that tender psalm, which begins with, "By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion." It's about the Jewish exiles in Babylon. And it ends with these terrifying words. "O Babylon, destroyer, blessed be he who seizes your little infants and dashes their brains out against the curbstone." What? How can you pray that? Oh, Benedict says, that's easy. It's symbolic. Babylon symbolizes hell, the devil's kingdom. And these little Babylonian babies symbolize evil thoughts, and that's where all evil begins. So have no mercy on those little bastards. Kill them. Right? Our warfare, the Bible tells us, is not against flesh and blood. Our enemies, we have enemies. The word enemies is used thousands of times in the Bible. But our enemies are not human beings. Our enemies are not the ACLU or Planned Parenthood or atheists or Muslim terrorists. Our enemies are demons, principalities and powers. Now, we have individual enemies, each of us, but we also have collective enemies. So angels must be somehow involved in social issues and political issues as well as individual issues. Are angels involved in politics? Yes, according to the Bible. Each nation has an angel. St. Michael is the angel for Israel. That's in Isaiah. I don't think political parties have angels. If so, they're doing a pretty lousy job. But yes, just as morality is both individual and social, it's a seamless web, so the spiritual warfare between angels and demons is social and political as well as individual. You can't omit either one. Another question, I'm just jumping from one to another. What's the life of angels? What do angels do? Well, they think, but they don't think like we do. We think step by step. We solve problems by saying, okay, that's the problem, and now what's the way to a solution? This is the way. All right, let me walk that way. Let me gather the data and perform experiments and whatnot, and now finally I've got the solution. All right, now let's go to the next problem. They don't do it that way. They just have insights. They read the mind of God. They have limited but real mental telepathy with God, and they see the truth as a kind of a reflection from God's mind. Something like that happens in our experience. Sometimes an insight just pops into your mind. You have no idea where it comes from. And that's not, I think, a supernatural miracle. That's natural. Every human mind has that ability to simply, oh yes, aha, the aha experience. Everybody who's done any kind of artistic or scientific or theological work or writing knows that, oh yeah, there it is. Where did that come from? I think it came from angels. So, when we speak of inspiration, we're talking reality. God is the source not only of all matter, by banging out the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, he's also the source of all truth, all light. Augustine calls it divine illumination. Our minds are just as dependent on God as our bodies are. And even our painful human process of gradually moving from a premise to a conclusion or from a problem to a solution, although that depends on our will and our courage and our intelligence, still the power to do it, the light that God gives to our mind, that comes from God. So we should thank him for those mental powers and the insights that sometimes come probably from angels, just as well as we thank him for our food. Now, I'm glad this is a men's conference because I think I'm not going to get in trouble by what I say next, but I would if there were mixed company. I think women are a lot better at this than men. Constantly, my wife and I realize that we're Mars and Venus. We have two very different communication systems, and it's very hard to shift gears because constantly I will say something, and I was going to say a second thing and then a third thing, and that was going to prove the third thing, and my wife will skip the second step altogether and go right to the third thing. I'm like an ant crawling along the ground. She's like an eagle jumping through the air. I think that's standard. That's normal. That's probably why women see angels more often than men. Men report them more often, and men write about them more often, because there are more reporters and writers who are men than women. But I don't have scientific proof of this, but from my at least amateur gathering of angel stories, it seems that women are more prone to see angels than men. And I suspect that women also tend to have more mystical experiences than men. Why? Because their minds are more contemplative and open. Ours are more active and rational. In fact, there was a faculty meeting at Harvard University about 20 years ago where the president, Larry Summers, who was a very intelligent man and well-liked at Harvard and a certified liberal, raised the question that got him fired. He said, "We are attracting too few women into the hard sciences. Women at Harvard tend to go into the humanities more than the sciences, and within the sciences they tend to go into psychology or sociology much more than physics or math. Now we need to solve that problem. We need to create equality. Liberals are very big on equality. Equality is more important than quality. So in order to find out what's the source of the problem, why we're not attracting enough women into the hard sciences, we need to look at the problem first. What's the cause? Why aren't we attracting women to hard sciences? Well, there are many possible theories. He said, as a scientist myself, I think we should go through them one by one and talk about all of them. And we should take them in a chronological order. So we should start with the traditionalist view, which I myself don't believe, he said, and probably nobody in this audience does either, but at least we should think about it. Namely, that there is some sort of innate difference between the masculine mind and the feminine mind. That the fact that throughout history, women tend to be better at one thing and men at another thing is due to human nature rather than just what you teach at Harvard or your environment. And he said, I don't believe that myself, but the majority of people in the past did. So let's look at that and try to refute that theory first before we go on to more modern theories. That's all he said. Half the audience left, the radical feminists who dominated Harvard. And they went into the board of trustees and they demanded Larry Summers' resignation, and he got fired. He was the only president in the history of Harvard who ever got fired. And his sin was suggesting that we even think about this traditional idea that there's an innate difference between men and women. So he went to Washington and he worked for Obama and he was well liked there. No, you're not allowed to think that. But obviously there's a difference between men and women. God says so. That's why he made us different. Our bodies are certainly different. Are our minds totally divorced from our bodies? Are we ghosts haunting houses? And the only difference between us is the houses and not the ghosts? That's ridiculous. Of course there's a feminine mind. And of course women do some things better than we are. And of course we do some things better than they are. And of course men are superior to women, vastly superior to women, at being men. And equally, they're vastly superior to us at being women. And that makes life interesting and confusing and politically incorrect. But it's God's idea. Thank you, God. Why don't you, when are your best ideas? You know the real story of how God invented men and women? The book of Genesis isn't false, but it's got it sort of backwards because he created Eve first. And he said to Eve, you lonely? She said, yep. And God said, well, I got a solution for you. It's called a man. What's a man? Said Eve. Oh, you'll love him. He's a knight in shining armor, and he's tall, dark, and handsome, and he'll be great in bed, and he'll open stuck jar lids for you, and you'll fall in love with him. That sounds too good to be true, said Eve. Is there a catch? Oh, yeah, there's always a catch, said God. What's the catch, said Eve. Well, said God, the catch is he's going to have a really big ego. So we're all going to have to pretend that I created him first. The other half of that bad joke is God created Adam first and said, are you lonely? And Adam said, yes. And God said, I got a surprise for you. And Adam said, what is it? And God said, it's a woman. Adam said, what's a woman? God said, oh, a woman is my masterpiece. Most beautiful thing in the universe. You will fall madly in love with her. And she'll be great in bed, and she'll fall in love with you, and she'll adore you, and she'll follow you, and she'll help you, and she'll never criticize you, and she'll never even bitch at you. And Adam said, that sounds too good to be true. Is there a catch? God says, oh, yeah, there's a catch. There's a price to pay, right? Oh, yeah, there's a price. How much of a price, said Adam? Oh, that's going to cost you an arm and a leg. Adam said, what can I get for a rib? Surprisingly, men laugh at one half of that joke more than women do. God's got a sense of humor. How could he not? If I were the president of a seminary, I wouldn't allow anybody to be a priest until they had gone to the zoo, stared at the face of an ostrich, and written an essay on God's sense of humor. I think angels have a sense of humor too. They have to, because God does. Well, that raises the interesting theological question, are there female angels? Well, if female means biologically female, of course not. There are no male angels either. But wait a minute. Is there masculinity and femininity in angels? Well, I think so. I'm not sure. Are there then angels that are more feminine than masculine? I think so, but I'm not sure. Well, wait a minute. Does that go all the way up into God? Well, look, God is the inventor of not just human biological bodies, which are either male or female, but also human spiritual souls, which are masculine or feminine. There is such a thing as the masculine mind and the feminine mind. And the inventor of something has to possess and fully know that something before he invents it. So I think that all the unique qualities of femininity as well as masculinity are present in God. Because the image of God, according to the Bible, is not just men, but man and woman. Male and female is the image of God. Why then, in the scriptures, is God always he and not she? And the answer to that question is very clear from the saints and mystics. Because God impregnates us, we don't impregnate him. He comes into us and gives us new life, as a man does to a woman. So that's a privileged image. But that doesn't mean that God, who invented women as well as men, doesn't have all the unique qualities of the feminine spirit as well as the masculine spirit. So I think that's true of angels too. But I'm not sure. The church has never defined that. Oh dear, I've taken 50 minutes already, and there's very little time for Q&A. Well, let me just add one thing that's very practical. Since some of the angels are evil and fallen and demons, and since they tempt you, they can't, by the way, force you. They can tempt you. But even angels can't force you. Your will is free. Nobody in the history of the world has ever been possessed by a demon without their will, without doing something foolish like playing with a Ouija board. But they can oppress you. They can harm you. They can get at your imagination, although they can't get to your free will or your mind. And the same with angels. You can reveal your mind to an angel. You can pray to your guardian angel, and they're not deaf. But they can't force you against your will. if you want to hide secrets from an angel, you can do that. You can't do it from God, but you can hide secrets from an angel. And demons cannot read your mind or influence your will. All they can do is tempt your imagination. What can you do to help fight this spiritual war? Because life is war. Well, one of the things you can do with regard to angels is to pray every day to your guardian angel. I hope you still do this. Most of us did it as children. The angel prayer. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, ever this day be at my side, to light and rule, to guard and guide. Very simple prayer, takes 10 seconds. Angels take you very seriously, as God does. Much more seriously than you take yourself. A holy priest once was talking about prayer, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, everything's in the Lord's Prayer, but when you pray the Lord's Prayer, be sure that you put a duck into it. He said, after you say, thy will be done, if you really mean it, you'll duck. God will take you seriously. Holy man. And then there's also the St. Michael the Archangel prayer, which is the prayer that Pope Leo XIII was given when, near the end of the 19th century, he had a prophetic vision of the coming century of war and sorrow and martyrdom. And in this vision, God gave the devil the choice of one century in which to do his worst work, and the devil chose the 20th. And the Pope saw that horror and went into a swoon. They thought he was dead. And he awoke and said, well, this is the prayer that God has given me to get us through that century. And you know the prayer. St. Michael, Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who roam through the world seeking the ruin of souls. That prayer was prayed at the end of every low mass throughout the Catholic world until the media hijacked Vatican II, and it was stopped in the 60s, and you know what happened in the 60s. So I think it would be helpful to go back to that prayer. Finally, pray to Mary. The devil fears her more than any other creature, even more than any other angel, because she's the Queen of Angels. And she's the one who conquered the serpent who seduced the first Eve. She's the second Eve. And she even conquered the horrors of the modern world. In Mexico, where 1/3 of all the children were sacrificed to demons, Our Lady of Guadalupe, miracle, 5 million conversions. In America, 1/3 of our conceived children are sacrificed, I suspect, to the same demon. And the Church has given us Mary as the patroness of the Americas. She's going to win this war. She's not afraid of the devil. He's afraid of her. I've left only a few minutes for questions. I'm sorry, but let's take some questions now. Yeah.
Sir, is it true that as a Christian we cannot believe in ghosts?
Oh, that's not true at all. I think most ghost stories are silly, but as a Christian, I think you should believe in the very strong probability of ghosts, because ghosts are simply human souls without human bodies. Souls whose bodies have died. Now, if you're still so attached to this world and so confused that you think you belong still in this world, I think it's quite possible that your spirit still associates with, let's say, the house you lived in. That's a haunted house. I think most ghosts come from purgatory, because most ghosts are sort of sad and they're working out some sort of purgatorial problem. Maybe some ghosts come from hell and try to deceive you. So I think we should be very wary. And some ghosts come from heaven. Some of them are bright spirits that give messages from God. Now, there's a lot of fake ghost stories in all three levels. So you got to discern. But I think we should keep our mind open to the possibility. There's so many apparently authentic stories about ghosts or spirits from apparently trustable people that I think it's very foolish to close our mind to the possibility. But frankly, nobody knows for sure.
Dr. Crape, you mentioned that Thomas Aquinas is an expert on angels. And then you also mentioned earlier that there really are no experts on angels. I'm assuming you mean like alive today, or maybe Thomas Aquinas is the only one.
He's the closest.
How did he become an expert on angels?
God gives you a special grace. And all you do is you open yourself to it. And you don't tell God what grace to give or what specialty to have. You just are open to it. And God just prepared him as a chosen vessel. Yeah. No. They make one choice at the moment of their creation in complete knowledge. So they're totally responsible for it. And they're not tempted and they're not led by anything else, so there's no excuses. So with the whole of their being, they make a choice that determines their eternal destiny. So no angel will ever fall and no demon will ever repent.
Yes. Doctor, the Bible seems to describe a different kind of angel than the ones you're talking about. I recall in the book of Genesis, there was angels that had lust for the women on earth and created a race of giants in the early Genesis chapters. Is that something that was just kind of incidental, or is there something else going on?
Well, if the first thing you said is true, namely the Bible speaks differently about angels than I do, then I'm wrong. The Bible's right. But I don't think there's a contradiction there, because in Genesis 6, it says some of the sons of God, which probably means angels. By the way, the term son of God in the singular is reserved for Christ alone, but the term sons of God usually means angels in the Old Testament. Mated with the daughters of men, seduced women. Can angels do that? Well, if they can assume bodies, they can. Does God allow demons to assume bodies? Possibly. Now, the church has never definitively pronounced on that. There are different interpretations of that. Maybe in this case, sons of God means good people, humans, not angels. Maybe it's not a bodily impregnation. And maybe these giants on the earth were not beings that came from this unnatural union between fallen angels and earthly women. And certainly that doesn't happen anymore. This was before the flood. So I just don't know.
Doctor.
It's a very mysterious passage.
Doctor, I have a question for you. As people are continuing to be born, are there angels still being created today?
No, angels are not still being created today, but there's plenty of angels to go around, because the guardian angels are the lowest of the choirs of angels, and there's one guardian angel for everybody, and that's billions, and there's plenty of others. I don't think angels are recirculated. I don't think your guardian angel was once somebody else's, but I'm not sure of that either. But God takes care of the math. That's beyond my pay grade.
Hi, Doctor.
One last.
I have a philosophical question for you. Is there any reason to believe that Socrates and Plato were intuiting something like an angel when they spoke of the daimon that influenced Socrates' thought and how they were describing various kinds of spirits like eros and so forth?
Well, Socrates, speaking of his daimon or spirit, gives him credit for leading him out of error, and even leading him to martyrdom. And I take Socrates very seriously, and I think Plato's Socrates is the real Socrates because he circulated those writings during the lifetime of those who knew Socrates, so he couldn't get away with big lies. So I think very likely that was the Holy Spirit. I don't think it was an angel because it didn't come with any messages from God. It wasn't a prophet. and it didn't take a human appearance or any other appearance, but it was definitely a source of divine inspiration. And its result was great good. Socrates as a martyr to the truth. So I think that was the Holy Spirit. In the Bible, the Spirit is described as working in very mysterious ways, and God, through His Spirit, works on minds. The whole point of the Holy Spirit is to get inside you, to a kind of a good haunting. So everything fits. I'm not sure, but I think it's very likely. I would be very, very surprised not to see Socrates in heaven, but who knows? Well, thank you.